I asked my FPL experts for their top transfer recommendations ahead of game week 2, and this is what they've come back with. Now, welcome back to the FPL Tom YouTube channel. Of course, if you do enjoy any of the content that you see here on the channel, make sure you're liking, commenting and subscribing, as we're trying to hit 17,500 subscribers before the end of the next international break, or the beginning of it, whenever. We're just trying to hit 17,500 subscribers, and it'd be absolutely amazing if, of course, you could help us achieve this goal. Now, I asked my FPL experts for their top transfer picks, and in the video all I'm going to do is say if I agree or disagree, and obviously comment on the players themselves. So let's start off with Sunday's hero. Of course, it was Chris Wood picking himself up a brace with a nice double-digit haul from him. A lot of the content creators writ him off. They said, you know, he was not going to be a good player. He obviously massively overachieved on his data. Forest weren't going to be as good as they were last season. Then they go and win 3-1. So a lot of content creators, including myself, currently have a lot of egg on our face. And the FPL experts I've asked are potentially looking at bringing him in. And you can see why. Obviously, if you can navigate around the game week 4 fixture, there are some really, really tasty fixtures in here for Nottingham Forest. You're looking at West Ham in game week 3, Burnley in game week 5, and of course Sunderland in game week 6. So there's plenty of kind of, you know, more potential for Chris Wood to, of course, go and get lots more of attacking returns. He's also being brought in by a lot of the FPL managers as well currently for this game week. However, I do have a few doubts around Chris Wood and whether or not he actually is going to be a good player to go and bring in. Now, of course, we know he's, you know, minutes, they're all right for now. Fixtures, they seem pretty decent, so that's a pretty big tick for me. He's on penalties. He can actually overachieve on his data, so there is that as well. But there are some concerns. Concern number one is, of course, they bought Jesus from Botafogo, who came off the bench yesterday, and Chris Wood saw only around 79 minutes. They've also just gone and bought another forward as well, so that's now 3 forwards. If they're going to continue with this one up front formation, you're going to have 3 players competing for 1 spot. That doesn't seem great to me. They've also got European football as well starting to kick in over the next few weeks, so you're probably going to see some rotation as well for the Nottingham Forest side. Whether that's going to be in the league and whether or not that is going to affect Chris Wood is another matter. However, it does seem like Nottingham Forest are going to continue to be busy at the close of this transfer window. So I would not be surprised if Chris Wood's minutes do start to become under jeopardy over the next few weeks, unless he absolutely goes nuclear over that period and just can't stop scoring. But I don't quite think that is going to happen. Like I said, the fixtures are definitely there and definitely worth targeting. I do just have a few concerns around the players that Forest are bringing in and whether or not he is actually going to continue to see pretty decent minutes, or whether or not those substitutions are going to get earlier and earlier and earlier. But if you are in the market for a 7.5, I don't mind it, to be honest. Like I said, the fixtures are definitely there, and he could be one of those players that could just nicely tick on and massively go under the radar, like he did at the start of last season, with a lot of content creators writing him off early again. Let's move on then to our next player, and it is going to be Reijnders. I mean, this guy, is there any real shock that a lot of people are looking at him and why he was recommended by my FPL experts? The guy was absolutely insane in game week 1, wasn't he? 1 goal, 1 assist, obviously a 10-pointer for him. 5.6 million now, probably going to increase again before the deadline, I would imagine, and his ownership is just shooting through the roof, and for very, very good reason. If you can get a Manchester City side who are always going to be one of the best attacks in the league for anything under 6 million by the time we probably get closer and closer to game week 2 deadline, yeah, it just makes sense, doesn't it? It just makes sense. If the minutes are definitely going to be there as well, I think Reijnders could be an absolutely sensational pickup. The only concern I do have with Reijnders is, was it a case of Manchester City being a really good side, or was it a case of Wolves are just a really bad side that we need to be targeting this season? So I want to see how things play out over the course of the next few weeks before I personally commit to Reijnders as well. They're also going to have Champions League football coming up, and we know what Pep's like. He is one of those managers that does just continually rotate with his players. So again, that would be a concern, and I want to see what his minutes are like over the next few weeks, and of course when Champions League starts to kick off again. I also want to see how Reijnders fits within that squad. Is there going to be some earlier substitutions, or is he going to continue to still be a great player? Because the link up between him and Erling Haaland looked absolutely succulent over the weekend. So I do think, there is definitely good reason why the FPL experts recommended him. And I think, if I'd maybe picked the wrong 5.5, then maybe I would be, definitely thinking about potentially bringing in Reijnders. I've currently got Tielemans within my side. I'm giving him 2 more weeks before, of course, potentially making that move to look at Reijnders as well. So yeah, he's one that's on my radar. So I 100% understand why the FPL experts have recommended him for this game week. Let's take a look at the third player then that they have recommended, and it is going to be Semenyo. He was sensational, on game week 1 with his brace against Liverpool, and there's some really good fixtures coming up here. Bournemouth were one of the best sides for XG created as well last season. I can see that being a trend again this season. They haven't lost too many of their attackers. It is more the defensive area where, of course, they're going to have to get used to everybody, but going forward, they still look a real threat. They cause Liverpool a lot of problems, and if Wolves are as bad as they looked in game week 1, then it could be an absolute field day for Bournemouth in their second fixture of the season. So at 7.1 million, again, a player who's already received 1 price rise, and it would not shock me to see him potentially receive another one come the deadline. Again, I really like Semenyo as a pick. Obviously, he was one of the standout players last year. Probably a little bit wasteful in front of goal. Had plenty of shots, but his conversion rate wasn't as good. If he can take that step up in his game and get his conversion rate looking a lot better, I think he's going to start to work his way into a lot more people's teams. Because like I said, Bournemouth haven't lost any of their attackers. They were one of the best sides for XG created last season. It probably feels like that's going to be the case again this season. And realistically, I could see Bournemouth scoring in every single game that you can see over the next 6, in my personal opinion as well. And I think Semenyo is going to have a large hand in all of that. So again, this one gets the seal of approval from me. Great shout from the FPL experts. Taking a look at the next 3 players recommended by my FPL experts, and we're going to kick off with 2 Liverpool players. First up is going to be Ekitike. Again, a player that I think we've got a little bit more to talk about with him. Of course, he's played 2 games competitively rather than the one that we're seeing with most Premier League players. And I think it's a lot easier to make a judgment after, you've got a little bit more data and, of course, more games under the belt for, of course, is to obviously analyse the players and picks for FPL. So we've seen him in the Community Shield, we've seen him in game week 1, and I think he does look like a real great forward for Liverpool. Of course, the concerns I do have around him or, of course, the next 2 fixtures. I don't think it's going to be easy. I don't think there's going to be, loads of goals in those games for Liverpool. So we might see his points potentially dry up in that regard. I think as well, a lot of people are going to struggle to find that extra 1.1, probably by the deadline, 1.2 million, in my opinion, as well. A lot of people had just the 7.5 million. So it's going to be hard for them to, of course, find that within one transfer to get themselves up to an Ekitike. Maybe if you've got a Watkins or a Gyökeres, that move down is a lot more easy. However, I think both of those players have got exceptional fixtures in game week 2. I know Gyökeres had a stinker, but coming game week 2, Leeds, still worth probably holding on to him for that fixture. If he doesn't do anything in that one, that's probably going to be the point to hop off him. Watkins as well has got Brentford. Again, we saw how poor Brentford were at this weekend. So again, doesn't feel like the right time to, of course, hop off Watkins as well. So that's probably the issue, I would say, with Ekitike, is it doesn't seem like, the 9 millions have good fixtures this week. He's heading into 2 back-to-back red and difficult fixtures, so probably doesn't feel like the ideal hop-on point. You've also, of course, got the Alexander Isak transfer saga rumbling on as well, whether or not he's actually going to be joining Liverpool or if he's going to remain with Newcastle United. I feel if he doesn't join, then I think once that conclusion of the transfer window, game week 4 might be the ideal point to, of course, hop on Ekitike. That might be the period where we go, yep, he's got no competition really. His minutes have looked good. His performances have looked good in game week 2 and game week 3. Now he's got Burnley, Everton and Crystal Palace. That could be the ideal point for me where we all start to look at him as a potential option rather than right now in game week 2. I just think it's not feasible for a lot of people to, of course, go and get him. And I think if you're taking Watkins and Gyökeres out this early, does feel a little bit knee-jerky. You had them in there knowing the fixtures coming up. One bad performance definitely should not impact what you're planning on doing with these players. Stick with them. Especially probably Gokres I would give at least this week. Again, if he continues to disappoint, then maybe take a look at taking him out ahead of game week 3. Let's then head into the next pick. Again, we're sticking with that Liverpool theme. It is going to be Cody Gakpo. Again, this one's probably a lot more easier for FPL managers to get themselves to at that 7.5. There's a few other players that people were, of course, looking at around that price. I think, you know, maybe a Wirtz, if he disappoints over the next 2, I think, you know, there is that room again to go down to Cody Gakpo. Save yourself that extra million as well, which I think, you know, some people might, of course, do. His minutes looking very, very secure across the course of pre-season and in the 2 games we have seen from Liverpool as well so far. Again, though, the concern is if they sign Alexander Isak, what does that do to his minutes? What does that do to his place within the side? It does worry me a little bit, and that is where my concerns would start to rise. So again, doesn't quite feel like it's the ideal hop-on point for both the Liverpool players in my personal opinion. I like both of them as players. I definitely think a lot of people are going to be looking at these guys over the next few weeks. But for right now, I probably would just say hold your horses a little bit. Let's reflect on it. Let's go again for game week 4 with that Burnley fixture. See what's happening with the Alexander Isak situation before, of course, jumping into these Liverpool players. That is my advice, but I do like them as picks and understand why people are recommending them and, of course, why you might want to potentially go for them. Let's take a look then at the final player, and it is going to be Mohamed Kudus. Now, my opinion of Mohamed Kudus in pre-season was I was worried. I was concerned about his minutes, and those concerns are still there a little bit if Spurs sign another winger. The Semenyo rumours have died down a little bit, but of course you never know what could quite happen with the transfer market. But the reason I've changed my mind on him, his minutes are looking good. It's his adaptability as well. The Super Cup really showed that to me, that of course if they're going to play this 2 up front with the wing-back system, then they might play just Kudus and Richarlison or Solanke. You know what I mean? There's still that little bit of competition there, but I think Kudus is definitely going to be the one that would remain within there, and it probably would be Richarlison and Solanke that will actually swap out with each other. I think, yeah, he just has that adaptability, which is very much something that Thomas Frank likes within his frontline players. Obviously, we saw that with Brian and Mbeumo, could play on the right, could play up front. He liked that kind of, you know, durability around Brian's game, and I'm seeing that within Mohamed Kudus as well. So I'm liking him as a potential option. Actually had the joint most created chances as well in game week 1. Now, of course, it is very early to judge a player off the back of one good performance against the side that are probably going to be in the bottom 3 this season. I think maybe get this Manchester City game out of the way, maybe the Bournemouth one. If, of course, there hasn't been any new wingers join the club, his minutes are still looking very, very secure, and his performances have continued to be decent. Heading into the run from game week 4 could be the ideal point to, of course, hop on Mohamed Kudus. That's my opinion anyway. I want to see how the next few weeks do, of course, progress with him, what happens in the transfer market before, of course, jumping on this player and making any lasting transfers or decisions there. But that's my opinion. Again, though, I understand why people are looking at him, and I understand why the FPL experts have recommended him, because he did look very, very good in game week 1. Let me know what you think of today's video down in the comment section below. Of course, if you've got any questions about your team as well, get them in, as we'll try to answer as many as we possibly can. But thank you for watching today, ladies and gentlemen, and good luck in game week 1.